And good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I want to dig right back into the text that I introduced to you yesterday, and that's Isaiah chapter 34. And the reason for examining these Old Testament prophecies, as I am, is to demonstrate that the language of the coming of the Lord, the judgment and the resurrection that is found in the Olivet Discourse, Matthew chapter 24, 29 to 31, they shall see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. They shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He shall send forth his angels with a shout, with the sound of the great trumpet. And he shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather together the elect from the four winds of the heaven. Oh, well, that hasn't happened because the sun is still shining and the moon still gives its light. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, what a beautiful, beautiful sunrise this morning. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. So anyway, people go, well, see, all that stuff is still up there in the sky. And so what I've been sharing with you is the idea that this is typical Hebraic apocalyptic language. It sounds like, if we take it literally, it sounds like the destruction of literal physical heaven and earth. And it's absolutely amazing to me how when you start investigating this issue with futurists and you show from the Old Testament, look, here's the day of the Lord against Egypt, in which the Lord rode on a swift cloud, came into Egypt, and the river was dried up, and all the birds fell from the sky, and the fish in the river were killed, etc., etc. But you show them that this destruction that was predicted took place at the hands of Sargon, the Assyrian king. And so they very often respond, people do, by saying, well, okay, that was a day of the Lord. I understand that. But that wasn't the real day of the Lord. And yeah, I can see where that language was metaphoric then, but it's going to be fulfilled later in a physical, literal, material way. Evidently, they've never stopped to realize that Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 46 that God's modus operandi has always gone from that which is natural, i.e. physical, literal, we might say, although that word literal is not the greatest word to use there. But God has always gone from the natural to the spiritual. But those who are making the argument and are saying, well, yes, the destruction of Babylon, that was the day of the Lord now. Yeah, it was. And the language was metaphoric. It was figurative. It was not literal because the sun, moon, the stars were not destroyed. But we're looking for the day of the Lord at the end of time in which the sun, the moon, the stars will be destroyed. So they're going from the spiritual, non-literal, to the literal, in violation of 1 Corinthians 15:46. Okay, so yesterday I introduced to you and for you a passage that, look, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, when I was studying with my own personal eschatology, this passage just absolutely turned my head around on my shoulders. And the reason is quite simple. Now, if we read Isaiah chapter 34 in total isolation from other passages, then it might be difficult. Then a person might say, well, look, just look around. It hasn't been fulfilled. But just looking around is not the final determinative. It's not the ultimate criteria. Certainly not in all cases. Now, it was in the case of Jesus' resurrection from the dead. Jesus said, look, touch me, feel me, see that it is I, even I. Spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see me have. So yeah, there was an empirical, visual, tactile reality to that. But the day of the Lord's a different issue. Now, was the day of the Lord a physical reality that took place under the Old Testament? Absolutely. The question is, did those physical days of the Lord in the Old Testament point to another literal physical day of the Lord at some supposed end of time? And the answer to that is no. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I introduced to you yesterday Isaiah chapter 34. In Isaiah chapter 34, the Lord spoke about the day of the Lord. And he said, the mountains will melt with the blood of the nations. All the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved. The heavens shall be rolled up like a scroll. All their hosts shall fall down as the leaf falls from the vine, as fruit falling from a fig tree. Now watch. And if you remember, I only read part of this verse yesterday, and I did it for a reason. But I urged you to read the whole chapter. Okay, once again, verse 5. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven, indeed it shall come down on Edom. Now, wait a minute. If we're talking about the destruction of literal, physical earth, if we are talking about the dissolution of the constellations of the sky, why is the Lord focused on Edom? And why does he go ahead and say, the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah, which was the capital of Edom? And he says, once again, my sword shall be bathed in heaven, and it shall come down on Edom, and on the people of my curse for judgment. This is Edom. The sword of the Lord is filled with blood. It is made overflowing with fatness, with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah, and a great slaughter in the land of Edom. Now, that's all I'm going to have time to get to for this morning. But again, please consider the following. He starts out and he says, the earth is going to be completely destroyed. The constellations of the sky shall be dissolved. The earth shall be clean dissolved. The mountains will be dissolved with the blood of the enemies of God. So I want to repose the question. If the focus of this judgment, and if the reality of this judgment is an end of time, earth burning, or maybe earth dissolving event, why in the world is he focused on this little bitty, may I say, inconsequential kingdom of Edom and Bozrah? What's the point? You see, there's something wrong here. And the something that is wrong is when we try to impose our modern cosmology onto ancient Hebraic texts. And when we say, well, it says the earth will be dissolved, and it says the cosmos will be dissolved, the constellations will be dissolved, and it hasn't been done, therefore this passage is not fulfilled. That's the problem. Yesterday I talked about the need for understanding Hebraic apocalyptic language. There could not be a clearer-cut example of needing to understand the nature of Hebraic prophecy, apocalyptic language, decreation language than Isaiah chapter 34. Now, I would go into greater detail today, but I don't want to do that. So, once again, let me urge you a second time, read the entire chapter. and ask yourself, what sin had Edom committed that was so horrific that in what some people take as the end of the world prophecy, that God said he was going to single out Edom. By the way, did you know that the kingdom of Edom that existed when Isaiah wrote, that existed when Jeremiah wrote, that existed when the book of Obadiah was written? What was it about that kingdom, that inconsequential kingdom, inconsequential insofar as the scope of the world is concerned, certainly inconsequential insofar as the literal physical cosmos is concerned? What sin had they committed so that in this prophecy that is supposedly about the end of time and the destruction of the physical cosmos, that God said, okay, at the end of time, I'm going to pick on Edom. The reason, you see, is because God wasn't talking about material, physical universe, the literal cosmos, or the globe of the earth. He's talking about Israel's world and her conflict with Edom and Edom's sin against Israel, which was going to and was eliciting God's judgment on Edom. Now, tomorrow, on Wednesday, I'm going to dig even deeper into Isaiah chapter 34, and I'm going to show you, really honestly, how ludicrous it is to try to take this language literally. In the meantime, get a copy of my book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat, in which I go into great detail in explaining and doing in-depth exegesis on Isaiah chapter 34 to demonstrate, to prove the things that I'm only mentioning briefly here in these videos. Do yourself a favor. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com. Go to the bookstore, order the book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. Send me a note that says you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping, and that'll save you $5. Okay, I'm out of time for today. I'll see you on the flip side.